Hey, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory that's due to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem HaKakodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, who all in this truth room and well. Peace and salutations to the 144,000 and the rest of the elect. To you I say shalom. Coming to you back with another lesson through the Spirit. And I'm entitled this one, These False Prophets Will Receive the Reward. Because majority of Israel, Yasharallah, that today would be the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, they're not truly warning our people of what's about to come up on the planet Earth, which is ultimately gloom and doom. You know, a lot of sorrows, a lot of death, a lot of people losing their lives. You know, all these different plagues that are about to come up on the planet Earth. You know, ultimately for all the wickedness that goes on. But majority of these Jakes that are either Israelites, you know that they're Israelites, but are in these other congregations, or even those who don't know that they're Israelites. For example, these anti-Hamashiachs, these so-called Christians that claim to be following the Most High's words, which we know they're not. Ultimately they're deceiving their followers, their congregation, their sheep, not warning them about what's about to come upon the planet Earth, not telling them the true names, and even those who do have the true names of the Heavenly Father, which is Yahweh in ancient Paleo-Hebrew, and the real name of the only begotten Son, who everybody ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, which his real name is Yahushai in the ancient Paleo-Hebrew. Even though they may be saying the names, ultimately they're not really warning Israel about what's about to come from the true breakdown of the MOTB, which is the micro C-HIP from World War III, that ultimately, we're basically in it, but eventually it's going to go nuclear. And that's what they're not telling their congregation of all these things. So ultimately, once these these last prophecies come to pass and their congregation see it, they're going to have questions. They're going to have all these different questions, like, damn, y'all told me, the MOTB in Revelation 13 and verse 16 was sin. Y'all told me it wasn't a micro C-HIP. But now the so-called white man Esau Edom is telling me if I don't take this micro C-HIP, then I can't buy and sell. And they're gonna see, like, okay, those GMS guys, they were right all the time, while all these other camps, they were lying to their congregation. And ultimately they're gonna have a lot of blood on their hands, because it ain't warring Jake. They ain't telling the true names. And even if they do know the true names, they're not telling them, they're not warning them in truth and sincerity. They're just in it to fill their own belly. So ultimately all these false prophets, they're going to get put to death, along with the congregation, that follow them, that aren't part of the elect, because you do have members of the elect among these different congregations, but ultimately Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai is going to pull them out of that in due season. This is Deuteronomy chapter 18 and verse 20. But the prophet which shall presume to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or that shall speak in the name of other gods, even that prophet shall die. So that's both of these different Israelites, these other Israelite camps from, IUIC, that, they're telling Jake, okay, you're an Israelite. They're telling you who the devil is, Esau Edom, the so-called white man. But they're not pushing the true names. They're not pushing the true names of the Heavenly Father and the only begotten Son. And even if they do say them, it's not at their forefront. And then you have these other camps, Sakari, ISUPK, HOI. They may know the true names and, say them, but they're not really pushing the importance of those names. They're not pushing the importance of Yahushai. So ultimately they're deceiving their congregation because they're not really telling them about what this truth is about. Ultimately serving Yahweh Bashmiel Shai, kissing the Son unless he be angry, pushing the importance about his death, burial, and resurrection. So all these different Israelites, they're about to be without a covering. Ultimately because they're part of the wicked. They're part of the 2/3 Jake who aren't meant to receive salvation. So the majority of Jake isn't meant to get it, but yet, they still have to play their role because you're going to have the true prophets of the Lord, and then you're going to have those false prophets. Verse 21, Deuteronomy 18:21. And if thou say in thine heart, how shall we know that the word which the Lord had not spoken? Verse 22, when a prophet speaketh in the name of the Lord, if the thing follow not, or come to pass, that is the thing which the Lord had not spoken, but the prophet had spoken it presumptuously, thou shalt not be afraid of him. So you see all these camps, not really prophesying, not really warning Jake, because ultimately the spirit of Yahushai is the spirit of prophecy, and that's what they're not doing. They're not prophesying about Jacob's trouble. They're not warning Jake about World War III. They're not warning Jake about martial law, famine, pestilences, all these different, and ultimately they're not warning Jake about the MOTB, the micro C-HIP. They're not warning Jake about the thermonuclear destruction that's going to take place in America and how to escape it. So ultimately all these false prophets that are teaching about prosperity and prosperity doctrine and about peace and safety and go get a bag, and even those who claim that okay, America is gonna collapse, is gonna be destroyed, but not now, maybe in 1,000 years, maybe in 500 years. That's what these Jakes are telling their congregation. So ultimately very soon they're about to find out, like, damn, these guys were lying to us all this damn time. We were paying our tithes, we were giving donations, and for what? What did it profit us? It ain't get us delivered. It ain't get us delivered in the chariot. It ain't keep us safe during Jacob's trouble. It ain't keep us safe when all hell break loose. So ultimately they're gonna have a lot of blood on their hands, all these false prophet camps. This is Matthew chapter 7 and verse 15. It says, beware of false prophets which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. That's majority of Jake. These so-called Christians, these Christian pastors, Roman Catholic pastors, these other Israelite camps, they claim to be in the truth. They're ravening wolves because they're not really in it to serve, Yahweh Bashmiel Shai in truth and sincerity. They're just in it to fulfill, their own desires, to fulfill their belly, to fill their belly, because their belly is their God. Very soon they're about to find out that ultimately, selling the truth, that was a dire mistake. It's going to lead to them to get destroyed, but with a more severe punishment, because like the scripture says, those that knew the Lord's will and did it not are going to be beaten with more stripes, which is going to these Israelites that know that they're Israelites. This is Ezekiel chapter 13 and verse 8. And it reads, therefore thus saith the Lord Yahweh Bashmiel Shai, because ye have spoken vanity and seen lies, therefore behold, I am against you, saith the Lord Yahweh Bashmiel Shai. And that's what majority of these other Israelite camps are doing, that aren't teaching the GMS doctrine, and the affiliate brothers, the affiliate camps. Ultimately they're just speaking vanity. They're speaking all these things that don't matter, trying to build a community, forming unity camps, talking about building farms and building school and going overseas, to start camps overseas in Africa, among Ham. That's how bugged out these other Israelite camps are, ultimately because they sold out. They sold out to Esau, even the so-called white man. They got the bag. They got the 501c3, so they really just can't teach the 100% truth. You know, they're teaching here bits here and there, but other than that, they're not really pushing the 100% truth that GMS and our affiliate camps is pushing out. You know, so ultimately, all they're really about is vanity. You know, debates, rap music video, Hebrew Israelite rap music videos. You know, mixing the truth with the world, which Yahweh Bashmi Shai commanded us not to do that. Verse 9, and my hand shall be upon the prophets that see vanity and that divine lies. They shall not be in the assembly of my people, neither shall they be written in the writing of the house of Israel. Neither shall they enter into the land of Israel, and ye shall know that I am the Lord, Yahweh Bashmi Shai. And just like it says in the last chapter of Revelation, you know, those who take out of the scriptures and add unto their own, or that take out of the scriptures, ultimately they're going to be put in that lake of fire, because they you know took the certain parts of the scriptures out and you know remix it to fit their agenda. So Yahweh Bashmi Shai is about to repay these wicked ass false prophets, these wicked ass pastors. You know, they use the scriptures for their own ill-gotten gains. You know, so ultimately, though, they're not part of the elect. They got to play their role to be an example of what happens when you know what Yahweh Bashmi Shai's will is and you don't do it. You know, because you do have members of the elect, you know, in these other camps, you know, sincere brothers, but Yahweh Bashmi Shai is going to pull them out of that. You know, and he's going to leave the rest, the wicked, the 2/3, there to be, you know, put to death, to be burned up. Verse 10, because they have seduced my people, saying peace, and there was no peace. And one built up a wall, and lo, others dabbed it with untempted mortars. So that's what these other camps are saying. You know, they're talking about peace and safety, prosperity doctrine. You know, everything's okay. You know, America's not collapsing. Even though it's evident, you know, that this place is done, but yet they're telling their people, continue to build here, you know, build generational wealth. America's going to continue on like it's been doing. You know, nothing's wrong. Nothing's happening around the world. There's no nations at war with each other. You know, America's, you know, friends and allies with every single nation in the world. That's what these false camps and these Christian churches are telling their people. Even though it is obvious, but only the elect are going to be given that spirit to see through all the lies and deceptions of these Christian churches, these other Israelite camps. And Yahweh Bashmi Shai is going to allow them to see, okay, damn, World War III is basically here. Damn, the MOTB is here. You know, the micro C-hip. You know, all hell's about to break loose. Jacob's trouble is here. But ultimately, only the elect are going to see that, while the rest of these camps and their congregations that are wicked, all those, you know, false sense of reality, those false bubbles that they made for themselves, is going to collapse. And it's collapsing as you know, as we speak. Verse 11, say unto them which doubted with untempted mortar, that it shall fall, there shall be an overflowing shower, and ye, O great hailstones, shall fall, and stormy wind shall rend it. You know, so all these Israelites that are so-called stable right now, you know, because nothing has really popped off. Once all hell breaks loose, once Esau Edom comes down with that great wrath, once we see those missiles flying, you know, ultimately all these walls that they've built, you know, to hide themselves from reality, now they're about to have a rude awakening. This is Jeremiah chapter 23 and verse 32. Behold, I am against them that prophesy false dreams, said the Lord, Yahweh Bashmi Shai, and do tell them, and cause my people to err by their lies and by their lightness. Yet I sent them not, nor commanded them. Therefore they shall not profit this people at all, said the Lord, Yahweh Bashmi Shai. So the Lord didn't send all these prophets out. You know, they have no profit for their congregation. They have no profit for Jake, because they're just telling Jake this and that, America's gonna be healed. The micro C hip ain't no micro C hip. They're just out here in these different podcasts and debating, making a merchandise out of the Lord's house. So they don't benefit anybody. They don't benefit the Lord. They don't benefit Israel. So ultimately, there's no use to them. Like I said, they're dumb dogs. They can't bark. How about Shemiel Shai is gonna have to put these wicked ass jakes to death? This is Jeremiah chapter 14 and verse 5 and verse 14 and verse 14. Then the Lord said unto me, the prophets prophesied lies in my name. And that's a lot of these jakes, a lot of these other Israelite camps. I sent them not, neither have I commanded them, neither spake unto them. They prophesy unto you false vision and divination, and a thing of naught, and the deceit of the heart. So Yahweh Shemiel Shai didn't send all these Israelite camps that aren't pushing prophecy, that aren't breaking the MOTB down, that aren't warning about Jacob's trouble, that aren't telling their congregation about the true names. But in their mind, they believe that the Lord is dealing with them, which obviously, he's not, because they're not really doing what he commanded them to do. Really, they're just speaking out of their own mind, doing their own thing. Verse 15, therefore thus said the Lord Yahweh Shemiel Shai concerning the prophets that prophesy in my name, and I sent them not. Yet they say, sword and famine shall not be in his land. By sword and famine shall those prophets be consumed. And that's what's going to happen. We see that the famine is basically here. Food stamps getting cut out, all these different benefits getting cut out. And along with all these false Israelite camps, they're going to be taken by these things, by the things that they're telling their congregation that's not going to happen. They're telling their congregation, no, there's not going to be any Jacob's trouble. There's not going to be any famine. Everything's going to be okay. And all the lies that they're telling their congregation is going to come to pass. And they're going to get taken by these things, along with their congregation that are wicked, the 2/3 that aren't part of the elect. Verse 16, and the people to whom they prophesy shall be cast out in the streets of Jerusalem. And Jerusalem is a people before it's a place. And where is majority of Jake concentrated in? Here in America, Babylon the Great. Because of the famine and the sword. And they shall not have none to bury them, their wives, nor their sons, nor their daughters. For I will pour out their wickedness upon them. And that's what's about to happen. Because Jake is wicked as all hell. He don't take heed. They don't take rebuke, to the real prophets. So they're going to keep prophesying lies. They're going to keep making a merchandise out of the ministry. They're going to keep, squeezing all the different donations, money that they could get out of their congregation, because they're not really in it, to serve Yahweh Shemiel Shai. They're really in it to serve their own belly, because their belly is their God. But they're about to find out what happens to those who don't serve Yahweh Shemiel Shai in truth and sincerity. Ultimately, they're going to get put to death by all these things that they're saying that's not going to happen. But that's pretty much the point. I pray this is edifying to the elect. I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, who are in this truth from and who do it well. Peace and salutations to the 144,000, the rest of the elect. Unto you I say shalom.